Okay, so this is a pretty spur of the moment response video to Kevin Logan's answers to questions white men have for SJWs. I was just watching it and I felt like making a response video. I expect very much to match his own enthusiasm here. I suspect this will be the longest, most serious, dry, and boring video I have ever done. So maybe skip it. I don't know. I'm in this kind of mood. So I'm not going to respond to every little thing. I'll cut some redundant points out. And I have no interest in responding to shots taken at particular YouTubers. I just don't care about any of that. So Kevin does make the fair point early on that he's only speaking for himself or his interpretation of the intentions of others. So that caveat applies to me as well. So here I go.
Why do you claim to speak for LGBT people, women, and ethnic minorities, but when LGBT people, women, and ethnic minorities disagree with you, you harass them?
Why do you claim to speak for white men, but when white men like me, for instance, disagree with you, you harass them?
Well, I don't actually claim to speak for white men, and I don't think any of the people involved in this video do either, aside from the title, which is an obvious play on, the Buzzfeed formula, right? If any of them do claim to speak for white men, then obviously I need to disagree with them. It's very much contrary to the point of rejecting people who claim to speak for others as a collective based on factors beyond their control and ignoring the individual. So maybe you try not to do this, but it'd just be willful ignorance to pretend it isn't a common trend among the loudest of the SJW voices.
Also, it's interesting that a group of people who, including the Amazing Atheist, claim that you can't do internet harassment. That's not harassment. That's fine. Until it suits you.
See, that's not a claim I'd make either. Of course, internet harassment is a real thing. I think the problem here may be how you define internet harassment. I mean, if somebody's saying mean shit to you on the internet, either suck it up or use that block feature that the SJWs love to use so much. I mean, someone saying mean things to you and about you or whatever on the internet, it's not harassment. Okay, it's being a dick, yeah, but the doxing of Blair White, for example, very clear internet harassment, and something I know you condemn, as you should, the doxing of anyone on either side. So anyone on either side of the argument committing such an act, it's abhorrent. There's no excuse for that. And lately, honestly, I really only see this being done by the social justice warriors and even praised. They're seeing it as like a point of pride that they've revealed private information about people, and potentially made them subject to real life danger. And then there's, death threats, bomb threats, and the like. I've never seen any of these YouTubers that you're talking about condone any of that behavior either. Real harassment with real consequences, not just offensive language or harsh disagreement or even just being an immature asshole. I mean, you have no problem calling people cunts, so why should anyone else? It's not harassment. It's not nice, but it's not harassment.
Do you realize that your war on language through political correctness has made you bedfellows with true rape culture? In other words, Islam.
Only Muslims are doing rape, people. That's the narrative. Let's stick to it.
No, that was never the narrative, and I think you know that. It's been highlighted by us, yes, because of the strange trend of leftist protectionism, not only of Islam, but of any criticism of Islam. And this is by the same people who shit all over Christianity as a general rule. They feel like that's okay because they consider it to be mostly white, and we're going to get to that in a bit. But no, not only Muslims rapes, not all Muslims rape, but it is an example of a very real rape culture, which is what Undoomed actually said, rape culture. And no, I don't believe there is a rape culture in the Western world.
The world's most misogynistic ideology.
That can definitely be argued, that point, yes. I think Islam probably is the world's most nakedly misogynistic, anyway, ideology. And that's one of the reasons I don't like Islam.
Well, congratulations on being more reasonable than the people that you defend. But you still want to try to protect their narrative, and I don't understand why.
But the idea that, let's not focus on any problems here. Let's just look over there. The brown people are doing stuff.
I'm sorry, who's doing that? Who on our side is even acknowledging how many of them are brown? Who? Like, I don't know these people. This is what your side does. In fact, it's the only real reason criticism of Islam is being outright shut down by your side. The same side who will shit, like I said, all over Christianity with immunity under the notion that it's mostly a white religion. Ignoring entirely, by the way, the very large black Christian communities, especially here in the States. Nobody I know of in the anti-SJW camp who is arguing against Islam is pointing out that they are brown. You guys are doing that. We're the ones not mentioning race at all. We're talking about the ideology. Not all brown Muslims, not all fucking Muslims, but the core doctrine and how it has influenced an extremely toxic culture. And this is something you even fucking agree with here. So, pointing out that the same people presuming to champion against rape culture and the people who shut down criticism of a literal rape culture is pretty fucking significant point to make. Nobody is arguing that rape isn't a problem in the West, though obviously we don't believe it's the rampant epidemic that SJW is painted as. And little things like preaching against due process and rape cases and things like that, they put us off a bit too.
Do you want women to be equal, or do you want women to be a protected class? You can't have both. If you expect society to treat women as equal with men, why don't women have to take responsibility for their own safety?
Women do take responsibility for their own safety. Most women carry like mace or a rape alarm or something with them, but women do take responsibility for that shit. The difference is if you say, oh, you did something like, I don't know, you dressed in a particular way, or you got drunk, or you were in the wrong part of town, or you didn't learn fucking black belt karate or something like that, and then you got raped, therefore it's your fault. That's fucked up. Now, I'm not accusing the armed skeptic or any particular individual of saying that, but that does get said. That's what we're arguing against. Certainly that's what I'm arguing against.
Well, I don't really know who you're arguing against, but I don't have a problem with your argument. I agree completely. And like you hinted, so does everybody else that you're responding to, as far as I know. This doesn't actually put you at odds with at least the key voices of this particular community. I do have a problem with you failing to realize that your side tends to take this much further than you do, to the point where some have even discouraged women from taking self-defense classes under the narrative of teach men not to rape. So yeah, blaming a woman for getting raped is fucked up. Convincing women not to learn to protect themselves is every bit as fucked up. That's what I'm arguing against. Both extremes are insane.
How can you possibly justify the idea that it's somehow racist to disagree with Black Lives Matter, and yet it's not racist when a black person tweets something like, kill all white people?
I don't think it is necessarily racist to disagree with Black Lives Matter, certainly in terms of their tactics. I think, for instance, most recently the interrupting and sidetracking of the Toronto, I think it was Toronto, wasn't it? Gay Pride march. That was disgusting. So there are things they've done which are pretty bad, but so I don't think that's racist inherently at all. Yeah, but I think if you want to downplay, and we'll get back to this in a second with TJ, but if you want to downplay that shit, that is racist. But if you want to downplay the core arguments, that's racist, I would suggest.
Well, as much as I agree that it isn't racist to disagree with their tactics or to criticize them, I don't actually agree that it's racist to downplay the core argument. If the core argument is that black people are being systemically targeted by white cops or by the system, that's disingenuous. And the only logical conclusion to this kind of message is division and violence, like we saw in Dallas. I mean, I expect that to keep happening, unfortunately. I haven't really spoken much about this issue and haven't touched on it at all, I don't think, in my actual videos. But I think Black Lives Matter is actually counterproductive, both in execution and in their core message. I've learned from experience as a young asshole growing up below the poverty line myself that police brutality and accountability is not a purely racial issue. Black people may be affected disproportionately by that, but that fact begs further analysis than just considering it all racism. That's fucking lazy. I think the problem's actually worse than they think it is. And I think you really do have to go back to the end results of the civil rights movement and acknowledge the failures of integration after the initial victory. Unegalitarian, misguided attempts at compassion that led to complacency and over-reliance on social programs at a time where, in my opinion, the civil rights movement simply wasn't over. It's not hard to see why people would start to buy into these conspiracy theories of concerted attempts to keep black people down. But to be completely honest, I don't believe that. I think it's largely the result of short-sightedness at the time. And of course, there's actual racism in the world. We're not denying that. But I don't really hear any Black Lives Matter advocates exploring this particular avenue of discussion. In fact, I see them largely supporting the same failed solutions that have kept their community down for decades after the civil rights movement. I think it's worth having a more in-depth conversation about this, but I don't think Black Lives Matter is the answer.
Are you aware that the present is not the past? I'm not kidding. Are you familiar with the concept of linear time? Because you seem incredibly comfortable traveling back through time to talk about how bad things were for women or black people or whoever. And then by using some form of SJW magic, you then claim or imply that those problems in the past exist today. Are you aware that this trick that you're doing is not working?
I don't think people, by and large, and certainly I'm not saying that those problems necessarily still exist, it's that they have a hangover effect. They still affect society. You can't just stop like a fucking centuries old practice and then none of the problems that come from that practice remain. Like they're obviously going to have a hangover effect.
Yeah, on the racial front, that's sort of what my last point was getting at. But you have to actually properly identify what's giving you the hangover before you can cure it. And I don't think Black Lives Matter is doing that. I don't think it's fighting against the proper problem in their communities, or at least not the entire problem. They're not seeing the big picture, and I think that's dangerous, especially with the way they've taken it. You know, it's turning into an all-out race war. There's nothing healthy or good about that. Nothing good is going to come out of this extreme version of Malcolm X's teachings. I mean, this isn't productive. But I mean, in terms of feminism, the hangover effect towards women, I'm not sure how you'd argue that applies. Maybe it's fair to say that certain social expectations linger from the past. I think it's definitely fair to say that feminism itself has failed to address many elements of actual patriarchal practice that actually benefit women over men. You know, MRA, look at me. But on a sociological level, this is really complicated by the fact that women are actually fundamentally, physiologically, and biologically different than men in so many ways. So when you're in our current state where women do have equal opportunity, but maybe some of these social factors actually inform their lack of desire to take these opportunities, I mean, how can you fix that without creating more actual inequality? Education, right? But what are we teaching them? Female interests in computer science, which is my field, has dropped significantly just in the past decade, and this suspiciously seems to correlate with the rising popularity of gender studies that teaches them to expect harassment and discrimination. It teaches them to expect resentment from their male counterparts who feel they shouldn't be in this field at all. That's what we're teaching them. Hysterical fucking nonsense. And they're less interested in the things that feminism wants them to be interested in the first place, because they're being scared out of it by them.
Feminism and egalitarianism are both for equal rights. Then why does one start with a gendered prefix while the other one is entirely gender neutral?
Wow, semantics, that's interesting. Basically, feminism fights for something, and egalitarianism, or people who call themselves egalitarians, don't. It's just a get out of jail free card as far as they're concerned.
I don't know, maybe some people do use it as a get out of jail free card, but I don't. And while the word itself only denotes an equality principle rather than a movement, it is a very significant word considering how unegalitarian modern feminism has become. And this is why saying feminism is about equality doesn't actually fucking mean anything. You're not saying anything when you say that to me. You have to say what kind of equality you're talking about. And when they explain it, what they're talking about is equality of outcome. That's not egalitarianism. They aren't shy about this at all, and they wear it on their sleeves. They're very happy to promote equality of outcome. So when you are a person who believes in equality of opportunity and promote an egalitarian society, and then you're met with an equality principle counter to that core belief, you absolutely have something to fight for as an egalitarian. So it's completely wrong to say it fights for nothing. Feminism can be egalitarian in nature too. Earlier branches of it have been, and some people still use it that way. I understand that and acknowledge that as well. But SJWs, intersectional feminists, PC culture, whatever you want to call it, does not operate on this principle. So if you're a seriously egalitarian person, you're in a position to fight for that belief. So I call bullshit on that whole idea.
How can you possibly say that the phrase all lives matter is somehow racist? It sounds like something the Dalai Lama would say.
It's not that saying all lives matter is racist, okay? Because I think the vast majority of humans that exist accept that all lives actually do matter. It's when people say Black Lives Matter and you respond with no, all lives matter, that's racist. Or certainly that can be perceived as racist, or at the very least, pretty fucking ignorant. And the analogy, I heard a very good analogy the other day. It'd be like going to the doctor and saying, "Oh, doctor, I've got a problem with my shin bone." And the doctor then says, "Oh, well, why are you fucking focusing on the shin bone? You've got lots of other bones as well." When you say all lives matter in response to Black Lives Matter, you're saying essentially, shut up, coon.
People might not expect this, but I actually do agree with this at this point. I mean, I was sort of like all lives matter when Black Lives Matter was new, but I think what Kevin's saying about the, shut up, coon, that is true enough of enough people that dropping the all lives matter response is probably a pretty good idea, just in terms of productive conversations. I mean, I've seen it coming out of the mouths of some genuinely fucked up racist people, white nationalists, neo-Nazis, or what have you. And yeah, and well, it's hard for me to get behind anyway, because I don't believe that they're completely devoid of any point. Unlike the intersectional feminist ideology, I think Black Lives Matter at least is sort of onto something, and it's not completely non-racial. So yeah, I think it's counterproductive. I think stop using it. Take another approach.
So if a drunk man sleeps with a drunk woman, the woman is incapable of giving consent, but the man is? Is it?
It's a complicated issue. I mean, the way you word that is so vague, I can't really give you an answer. I don't know. Fuck off.
Fair enough. But, I mean, I really don't agree that it's all that complicated. Not this specific issue, anyway. I mean, there's a good amount of common sense involved here. If she can't form coherent sentences, if she's fucking passed out, she's too drunk. I mean, being blackout drunk is not very hard to gauge. And yes, SJWs do focus on women only when they talk about this. They don't really mention male drunkenness. In fact, they ignore it in specific cases. So, I mean, it's a valid question to some extent. Also, what they tell you specifically is that if she's too drunk to drive, she's too drunk to give consent. This is fucking bullshit. I mean, my ex was too drunk to drive after 2 beers, but she was still coherent, alert, and capable of making decisions for herself and remembering everything that happened the night before. So, and for me, my tolerance levels was like 12 beers, and I'm still capable of making decisions. I can't drive, obviously, but I'm not fucking down on the floor, incapable of walking or speaking coherently. So, I mean, just pay attention to what's going on with the person you're with.
It's really easier to spend your life attempting to pacify the world and subdue all around you, instead of accepting that you are the person who has to change.
The white man has been in control for so long, and the world around him is changing. And it's he who has to change in order to fit it, because the white man is not going to be able to subdue the world around him in the way that he used to be able to. So the fact that you would use that argument reveals such a myopic fucking lack of self-awareness. It's untrue.
Right, the white man, this collective consciousness that we apparently all share. You know, I'd really like to know where I can cash in all these privilege points, to be honest, because I'm not seeing it. Plus, what makes you think he's only talking about race and gender? Social justice warriors are constantly demanding change from other people. Not just white men in charge, but women in charge. Whole institutions, organizations, media outlets, they demand to be protected from fucking language. They demand speakers that they disagree with be banned from events. They demand the entire fucking world revolve around their narrow world view. That's what Sargon's referring to. People who consistently reject any and all accountability for their own actions and insist on being pandered to.
In your version of equality, will white men ever have a voice in society?
Oh, when will the white man have a voice? Oh, God, America hasn't had a white president in like 8 fucking years now. Oh God, the white man is so badly put upon. Oh, he only controls 95% of the world rather than 100% now. Oh, when will you free my people?
Listen better. He said, in your version of equality, in that voice. That was actually a really important part of this question, because it's the difference between asking, when will white people have a voice, and do you just want white men not to have a voice? It's actually a pretty good question when you consider the equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome conflict we mentioned before. At what point do you fudge the numbers enough, silence the voices of white people enough, that white people become an actual oppressed class? If that model were strictly adhered to, white people would inevitably be oppressed, right? So would that future result in a fight for the rights of white men, or would white men just perpetually be considered oppressors regardless? But you couldn't answer that because you couldn't listen.
What is reverse racism? Like, what the actual fuck is it? It's just racism, right? I mean...
Yeah, basically. But it's mainly anti-SJWs who use the phrase reverse racism anyways.
Yeah, I don't think that's true, but I don't think it matters either. I have a bigger problem with social justice warriors constantly suggesting that black people can't be racist at all, because racism equals privilege plus power. Which is completely made up, but hey, why bother with honest arguments when you can just change words to suit your agenda? Right, Kev?
Have you ever considered that using the terms racism and sexism as haphazardly as you do to describe everything under the sun that makes you feel uncomfortable devalues the word to the point that it actually hurts the people who actually suffer from real sexism and real racism?
That's really ridiculously hypocritical, considering you fucking people have used the word or the phrase SJW to the point where it means fucking nothing now. To the point where people in this video have been accused of being SJWs by people who are further to the right than they are. To the fucking extent that people in this video have accused other people in this video of having been SJWs.
With a straight face, you can compare being called an SJW when you're not to being called racist and sexist when you're not. How the fuck does that even... Racism and sexism are two very serious accusations. If you're racist whenever you disagree with Black Lives Matter and you're sexist whenever you disagree with feminism, that devalues the word to the point where over time it evokes no emotional response from people. It's like a cry wolf scenario. Oh yeah, he's racist. Everybody's racist. What do I care? Shut up. But being called an SJW when you're not, mild irritation maybe, okay? I think they'll survive.
Anyway, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, your questions, your suggestions, and you telling me, if you want to, that I'm a cuck, a beta, a mangina, and whatever, because, you know, logic. Anyway, thank you all for listening and watching. Pip pip.
Nah, I'm not going to do any of that, but I'm going to wrap up my video too. Anyway, I don't know that anybody is going to or should listen to this video. I almost said watch, but listen to this video because there's nothing to watch. I do respect Kevin's willingness to engage, if nothing else. I don't really agree with where he takes a lot of his arguments, but I do respect that at least. So anyway, here's a video, and it's going to be uploaded, and then you can ignore it.